There's 5 questions CEOs should ask themselves. So the first one is the US business humming? Is the business doing well in the US? Do you have a great exec team, like strength and depth in the exec team? Is there demand from Europe? Is there a pull from the local market? Are you well funded? And the very last question, and the most important one of all, is this a personal priority for the CEO? So are the entire exec team bought into this? Because launching it in EMEA is hard. It's like may have a great product, you may have a ton of success in the US, but this is not an easy thing to do. And it will require buy-in from the full exec team and a lot of resources and time and energy.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the revenue intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for. Wendy, welcome to Reveal. We're super excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
And you're talking to us all the way from beautiful, maybe gloomy Dublin, Ireland. I don't know what the weather's like there today.
Shockingly, I can see sunshine, but it is a rare occurrence. So today is a good day.
And I'm sure anybody could have guessed from hearing your accent where you were from. So we have a little competition going of who has the most interesting and unique accent on the show. So you're definitely in the race for that now.
I'm delighted because I actually have been listening to your previous podcast, and I definitely wanted to get at least in the top 5. That was my main goal. So if I'm in the top 5, I'll take it.
First of all, I think there's something in the water in Dublin, because as we were catching up and getting to know each other, you were mentioning your siblings, and of course, you've had a great career in technology, and your siblings are both also executives at Google and Facebook. So you're kind of like leading the tech scene in Dublin. Are there certain values that your parents instilled in you all as children that you think led to your collective success?
Yes, thank you for asking that. This is the great mystery my dad always jokes about. I'm not sure either of them know exactly what it is that any of us do, but I will say that as far as parents go, they're pretty amazing. So and actually a little known fact is that I'm adopted. So my 2 brothers are not, but I'm adopted. So I think it's even more credit to them that it's not just the genes, it's actually how they raised us. And I think the first thing is work ethic. So my parents have exceptional work ethic, and to the point that when they were locked at home with COVID for the last year, I went to visit them one day and Dad said to me, did you see my roof? And I said, what about the roof? And he's like, I cleaned it. And I was like, Dad, it's the same outcome if you fall off the roof or you get killed by COVID. Like, I need you to stop that. So they never sit still. They have great work ethic. And I think the 3 of us have that. A second thing I think is that we all have fun. So we really believe in having a sense of humor and not taking ourselves too seriously and having a great laugh. And I always want to roar laughing every day at work. So it's very important to me and to my brothers. And the third thing I would say is that it's something I would call it's accountability and bounce back ability. They taught us that. So what I mean by that is that obviously, I was very lucky to be raised with great parents who, provided for us and sent us to good schools and everything. But there's plenty of people who had that opportunity, but see themselves as victims in life. And we never see ourselves like a victim, and we are accountable for our successes and our failures. And when doors get slammed in our face, we just got to try harder. And I think the best example I have of that is when I worked for Goldman Sachs for 11 years as a trader. And when I was trying to change into technology, following in the footsteps of my 2 brothers, I saw they had great careers and loved it. And every door was slammed in my face. And it was like, no, I'm sorry, this isn't available to you. You don't have enough, you just don't have enough experience. And so I swallowed my pride and took a job at Facebook earning 10% of what I used to on a contract role as a marketer. Thank you to Felicity McCarthy, who took a chance on me for my first role in tech. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. But it's bounce back ability and carrying yourself like the hero of your story and not the victim. So making your own success in life. Life doesn't owe you anything.
I love that perspective. I also have someone I dedicate to, the beginning of my career to in tech. I was out in Sacramento where government was kind of like, the next place people typically go. And it's tough to get into tech, but shout out to all the people giving first chances to good people.
Exactly.
So Wendy, congrats again, because not only are you an eventing champion, but you just joined Gong as the VP of EMEA sales. And so today we're going to talk about global expansion. It can be appealing for companies that see traction in the US or any geography to want to expand globally as soon as possible. And as with any other major decision, there are pros and cons. I'm curious to hear from you, what are the top 2 or 3 elements a company should assess to determine if they're ready to enter a new geo?
Yes, so I'd love to give credit to a friend of my brother's called Stephen McIntyre. He co-authored a report. He works for Frontline Ventures, and it's an excellent report that I highly recommend people read about B2B SaaS firms launching in EMEA. And he sort of suggested that there's 5 questions CEOs should ask themselves. So the first one is the US business humming? Is the business doing well in the US? Do you have a great exec team, like strength and depth in the exec team? Is there demand from Europe? Is there a pull from the local market? Are you well funded? And the very last question, and the most important one of all, is this a personal priority for the CEO? So are the entire exec team bought into this? Because launching it in EMEA is hard. It's like may have a great product, you may have a ton of success in the US, but this is not an easy thing to do. And it will require buy-in from the full exec team and a lot of resources and time and energy. And the size of the prize is enormous. And this report suggested that when many SaaS companies go public, in the region of 30% of their global revenues are coming from EMEA at that point. So it is a significant prize, but it is hard to launch. And he talks about something called success amnesia, which is when people launch in EMEA and they forget what made them successful in the US. They forget about the brand building and the marketing and all of the stuff building from the ground up. They can't assume everyone in EMEA knows, about your great product or your great success story. You've got to start from the ground up and build that.
Yes, intuitively, I would say it seems hard to enter a new geography, especially in EMEA, where you have different cultures, different languages. So that's one thing, but what else makes it so hard?
So I think, well, first of all, to your point, there are 50 different countries in EMEA. So, and I think it's something like 24 languages. So that as a starting point, it's really the opposite of sort of a homogenous structure. It's completely disparate. And I think if you ask most people in various countries in Europe, they would say, I am Irish before they say I am European. So everyone has these very strong national identities and subcultures within those. And, the differences between French nationalities, the Germans, the Irish, it's quite vast. And we may be part of the same continent, but how everything plays out is, in terms of employment laws, there's various different employment laws in these different countries. Some are more extreme than others. And I think most are much more extreme than the US. There's local privacy regulations. There's different, tax complications depending on what country you're in. There is, in terms of thinking about how easy it is to set up businesses in these different countries, there's different sort of, it's easier or harder depending on local regulations. So Europe is a complicated place. It's a great place and the size of the prize is enormous, but it is definitely complicated and it should be approached with enthusiasm, but also understanding that this is going to be a Herculean effort, which is worth the time and investment.
I agree with you, Wendy, and only because I was kind of a typical American and was like, yeah, Europe, they're all close together. They're probably fairly similar. I've been to Europe once, and someone on my team who's French was like, I'm French before I'm European, and so echoing what you had said, I imagine it might be similar to the States, right? Which is yes, we're one country, but folks in Alabama and folks in the West Coast are quite different. Though I don't know if we, Sheena, consider ourselves Californian before American. That's another conversation. I'm curious, though, it is tough to gain traction. So how do you measure traction in a new geo? What are you looking for kind of early indicators, hey, we're on the right pace, and then maybe some of the more long-term goals to say, yes, flag in the ground, so to speak, this was a success?
Yeah, and I can talk about, before Gong, I worked at a company called CarGurus, and I can talk about some of my experience there. And I think, CarGurus is a marketplace, so it's a car shopping website. So I think some of the first things we looked at was, each side of the marketplace. So in terms of the inventory, so the number of cars we actually got on site, we had a freemium model. So it was, okay, well, what sort of level of interest can we generate in terms of getting people onto the basic model? And then it was looking at, okay, well, what percentage of those can we turn into paid customers? And we looked at things like, okay, well, there's different types of customers, right? So you have your SMB customers, you have your mid-market customers, you have your enterprise customers. So how are you doing in each of those segments? And the time to sale in each of those, and the average order size in each of those. And I think that's stuff that you'd measure across, you'd measure that when you're starting a business in the US as well. And then with the marketplace like CarGurus, we're also measuring, well, the number of visitors to our website. So it's like the consumers each side. So you've got the dealers on one side and the car buyers on the other side. So monthly unique viewers. And then you look at things like share of voice, and press. So PR is a big part as well of any launch in EMEA, and sort of the share of voice that you get in the press, and thinking about the brand and sort of aided and unaided awareness. And I think, it might be, it's something that people don't necessarily think of straight away as well but it's the employee interest, right? So the number of applicants we get for the jobs, the caliber of the applicants we get for jobs, because you want, like, at the end of the day, every company is founded on great talent. We need to hire great talent. And is that proving to be easy, or is that proving to be difficult? And it's like, and it's the whole thing about building the brand. It's an employer brand as well as a product brand.
There's so many moving parts to executing a launch in Europe effectively. Oftentimes, what a company will do is, hey, let's hire somebody who's going to run all of our operations in that geo, just like we did with you. So we're very excited to have you. But it can be tough, right? It can be tough because you're looking for somebody who's not just a revenue leader, but like they have to almost be like the GM of that geography in some ways. What traits should a CEO or other executives be looking for when they're making that first hire in a new geography?
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. So ideally, the person would be a sales leader to begin with. But, I was lucky in that I had GM experience at CarGurus as well. And you do need someone who is an all-round athlete, because at the end of the day, this person is going to be responsible for hiring great talent, for building a culture, for being the face of the company externally. And, we're 8 hours ahead in Dublin, we're 8 hours ahead of San Francisco. So being the public face of the company and helping build a brand is a big part of it, as well as attending customer meetings, as well as helping close deals. So it is someone who has to be a great all-rounder. It is also someone who has to be a self-starter and use their initiative, and not passive and being waiting to be told what to do, because you have to get up and you have to make it happen. Ideally, your first hire will have a great network. So will be a local person with a great network of previous people they've worked with that they can tap into and help you get launched. And I think, I would recommend that this first senior hire is a local person, because they will have the cultural aspect. They should have a network of talent. But I also think there is real credibility to be given to sending a landing team as well. So I know we have 2 members of Gong, Adam and Lorraine, are coming over to Dublin as well to join me, and that helps seed some of the culture from headquarters. But another sort of element, last couple of things I'd say about your first hire is they are critical for giving feedback to the product team and to the marketing team and the engineering team and everyone about, okay, this is appropriate and this isn't. So it's about giving insight into cultural nuances about what will work, what won't work, but also someone who is able to advocate for resources. You can't have someone who is too shy and not able to go fight for resources. At the end of the day, there's limited resource in every company, and getting them allocated and the right amount of time and energy allocated to a launch in EMEA is a big task and a big ask. And you have to have someone who will use the Gong operating principle of no sugar and say it as it is, and sort of fight for mind share at the exec table.
Completely makes sense, starting as a sales leader, and obviously you'll kind of graduate into some other bigger projects. And I imagine maybe from day one, but maybe kind of a little more mid or long term is, influencing the product roadmap. So do you have any advice on, how to influence product roadmap? Because I imagine there's probably different requirements and needs, again, not just from the US to EMEA, but then all of the, countries that make up that geo.
Yes, I think with this, again, channeling the no sugar is clear, but also helping anybody who is not local to understand the context. So walk in their shoes and just take the time to explain to them why something is important, and differentiate between a nice to have and a must have. So for example, in EMEA, everyone in Europe is obsessed with privacy. It's like the EU and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is the most extreme privacy law, I believe, in the world. And so that is not it's nice to have. It's kind of like being GDPR compliant and understanding how to operate in EMEA and not fall foul of that is extremely important for anyone thinking of launching here. And, the fines are pretty big. I think it's something like 20 million euros or 4% of your global revenue. So really helping the product team differentiate between this is a must-have and it's non-negotiable, and this is a nice-to-have. And I think things like, the things to think about with product in EMEA are billing, right? The currencies, euro, Swiss franc, the pound sterling, and then things about localizing help desks and things like that. So there's various things that can come in different stages. So thinking about things in stages, and then what is a hill you must die on, where you're willing to die on, versus something that is okay, it can wait for now.
I mean, in some ways, like being this first hire and like kicking off and your entry into EMEA, it's really like starting a startup within a startup or within a larger organization in some ways. Like there's so many, you have to be entrepreneurial as well, right? You're thinking about marketing, you're thinking about product, you're thinking about sales, you're hiring, like really every aspect of the business, regardless of like how big the team is or how much traction they've already had, you're kicking this stuff off all over again.
Yeah. And to be honest, that's what was so compelling to me about this opportunity, because I've had the pleasure of working for some excellent companies, but I was never the very first hire. I always got in a little bit too late. So this opportunity to be one of the first, and any of the leaders who've worked for me, I always operate with a mindset of be the CEO of your business. When I worked at Facebook, I once saw something on the wall, which is nothing at Facebook is someone else's problem. And I think if you adopt that mindset and you're like, okay, we're all in this together, and anyone I hire, I don't have all the answers. None of us do, but let's figure this out together. And isn't it so exciting to be bringing a product as compelling as Gong to the market? Like, I just consider myself so incredibly lucky to get this opportunity, genuinely, because it's, building from scratch is just the biggest, most fun challenge ever.
A lot of that resonates with me. I consider myself a builder too. So those kind of problems and figuring out new solutions is really exciting for me too. So looking at your LinkedIn profile, like from the outside, it can look like, success upon success upon success. You were the first or one of the first at AdRoll and Dropbox and CarGurus in Dublin, leading either UK or broader EMEA efforts. But I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing. So could you tell us about a major setback that you encountered during one of these experiences, really getting those EMEA efforts off the ground for a US-based company?
Absolutely. I definitely want to say nobody's career goes up in a straight line. As I said, it took me, everyone slammed a door in my face when I tried to move from finance to tech. So I definitely haven't had a charmed life with it up and to the right completely. But when I think of one sort of cautionary tale, I would say is I worked for a tech firm where I don't think the work was done up front on the total addressable market and the true size, really taking the time to figure that out before launching. And what that meant and how that played out was there was a mentality of hire, get bums on seats. We need people as quickly as possible. We've got to get everyone in a seat. We've got to give them targets. We've got to get selling. And the intent was good, but the way it played out was it wasn't supplemented by enough thought about marketing and driving leads. And that, we spoke about how we measure traction earlier, and measuring traction, and your inbound leads, that's a really important measure of how you're doing in the market. So, and then also the SDR team wasn't built out. It was very nascent. So there was loads of AEs and very few SDRs. And so what ended up happening was you had these really high earning AEs doing menial work and spending a lot of time like prospecting. And so not enough inbounds to feed them and not enough SDRs to feed them. And then ultimately what ended up happening was we got into this horrible cycle of hiring and firing, and people, due to employment laws in Ireland, you've kind of got to make a call on someone by month 11 at the latest, and so the culture took a turn for the worse then as well. And it was a really good lesson. I think what I took away from it was, first is, when you think about launching in EMEA, think about segments, okay? You don't need to be everything to everyone on day one. It's like start with your SMB mid-market segments, build a build emotion there, build a brand, get some traction, build your culture, and also thinking about country sort of segmentation. So you don't need to launch in all your markets in Europe at once. So start with the UK, Ireland, start with what's known to you as, similar in, is not too much of a leap in terms of culture, and it has the local language. And then even things like a Dropbox, actually, South Africa was a really a great source of revenue for us because it's only 1 hour ahead and it's English language. So, and then Nordics tend to be very early adopters, and great English proficiency. Amsterdam potentially as well, or Netherlands as well. So think about sort of how you would scale out across EMEA, but doing everything at once, a big bang, all segments, all countries. There's a lot to be said for focus and staging, I think, was the big lesson we learned there. And also doing the work on the TAM and getting the marketing engine and getting the SDRs in place. So learning from those mistakes.
That's super interesting. It sounds like, just kind of like Sheena said, when you launch in the States, you start small, start targeted, get traction, go up market. Do you have any advice, Wendy, on how to pick which one of those countries to start with, right? Because you said, hey, don't try to get into all these markets at once. You mentioned, English being the primary language might be a good foothold. Is that I'm air quoting, sure thing, or are there other kind of factors to keep in mind too when picking those first lands?
I think the UK and Ireland is a safe bet, or the safest bet for American companies to land in general at first. Language is obviously, I just think culture-wise, it's not the biggest leap. And so I would say it's the most obvious place where most land. Thereafter, the big fish, the two other major fish, are France and Germany. Now, depending on the sort of product you have, especially if it's got a lot of privacy concerns, the Germans are notorious for, being concerned about privacy, and sort of that a lot of US tech firms struggle to crack Germany. So, but at the end of the day, if you want EMEA to be 30% of your global revenue, you've got to crack France and Germany. So I think it's like, start with UK, Ireland, think about even South Africa, as I said, although, obviously there'll be potentially some travel involved there, but think about scaling out Nordics, potentially, again, English speaking, but then France and Germany, you do need to figure them out at some point if you plan on making EMEA a huge chunk of your revenue, which it could be.
So being the first hire, or one of the first few hires in a new geo, while it can be exciting from that entrepreneurial lens, I imagine it could also be lonely, and you are on the other side of the pond from, the HQ and from all your other colleagues. How do you, from your past experiences, how do you maintain that camaraderie with your revenue colleagues back in the US?
Yes, well, it's fair to say the last year has been desperately boring because Ireland's had one of the most extreme lockdowns. We've been locked. Yeah. We weren't allowed to go more than 3 miles from our house for like 5 months. So it's been pretty desperate. Wow. So, but I will say, previous to that, I used to visit Boston. CarGurus are based in Boston. I used to visit there, pretty much once a quarter. And I have never found too much trouble trying to get the US folk on a plane to Ireland. I've found that there's quite a lot of demand for that, especially when the pubs are open. So, it has to be a two-way thing, and you've got to invest in FaceTime with people, because I think we're all dying of boredom with Zoom, and you've got to invest in the personal time with people and build connections and go for dinner and go for lunch and go for drinks, and that is time well spent. So I would say it does need to be a two-way street, and I'm very much hoping whenever we get our nice shiny new office in Ireland that you will both come and visit, and that also the execs will come visit. It's critical to have the FaceTime. But the other thing I would say is to minimize any sort of friction between revenue teams in the US and revenue teams in EMEA. Rules of engagement are key, right? So this is something that firms don't often think about until it becomes a problem. But where is the decision maker located? Where is the budget coming from? Are they buying for their European entity, their subsidiary? All of these things, that reduces unnecessary friction. At the end of the day, we all want, in this case, Gong to be the biggest thing ever. So we all have the ultimate end goal, but friction at a rep level or a sales manager level, it can be minimized and keep relationships sweet if there's just clear sort of swim lanes from up front. So that's kind of a tip I'd have.
I may or may not have been involved in some heated debate over rules of engagement in my selling career. Do you have any tactical guidance? Like, hey, I've seen this work and I've seen this not work, right? Because there's so many ways you can split it. It's like, is the HQ here or there? Is it LinkedIn or is it in Salesforce that we're using as our source of truth? Is it where the DM is? Is it, what's your kind of formula there, Wendy?
Well, one thing I would say, that the only time I was genuinely upset about something was when I perceived that the person who was meant to be neutral, who was in revenue operations or rev strategy, was actually very much not neutral and was very much in the pocket of the alternative person. So I think them being a neutral judge, whoever the person is key to anyone being able to accept a decision. And if it seems like they're very one-sided and every decision always goes one way, then they've no credibility. So I would say that's key. The second thing is about choosing your battles. I do remember very clear comment from one of my team members before, being like, it was at this point, the strats team's prospecting strategy seems to be to go in and check our pipelines and figure out, are there any subsidiaries? Are these subsidiaries of bigger companies? And I was like, okay, guys, it's probably not, but that's quite funny. So, but I just, and then once I do remember taking the moral high road and handing over a deal, and my reps really not happy that I did that. And I was like, at the end of the day, we're all in this for the company and to win, and you choose your battles. And if you approach things and be fair, you don't need to win every battle. It needs to be fair, right? So really important that the person organizing the rules is fair and perceived as fair. And then also you've got to be reasonable.
Yeah, it's such a good point too, is, handing over a lead, like, oh, I guess this, this lead I was reaching out to, but I haven't had a meeting with yet. That's not mine. Okay, go for it. If I'm mid or late stage and you go, oh, hey, actually, that's my account. Wendy, mind handing over that deal that you have in your forecast for this quarter? That's when things are like, not so fast.
Right.
But
okay.
You've made some great points about having a neutral judge. It's a great way to put it.
Absolutely.
Final question for you. We ask all of our guests, how would you describe sales in one word?
I would describe sales as risk. And what I mean by this is the fact that there are no guarantees in sales. And I have the utmost respect for salespeople who roll the dice, and they know the greatest highs and the roller coaster and the adrenaline, but they also have the worst lows. And when you back yourself and you go into battle every day, and this might be a bit of a leap, but I genuinely think of this. So Brené Brown, I love her work around vulnerability, and she spoke about Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech. And and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not going to remember, but it's like basically the credit belongs to the man in the arena whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. And who, if he succeeds, knows the triumph of great achievement. And if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. And I really applaud salespeople because they go into battle every month, every quarter. They roll the dice. There's no guarantees. And nothing frustrates me more when I see people turn their nose up at sales, and I'm like, well, really, do you go and roll the dice every day? Do you take risks? Do you put yourself out there and be willing to fail? And I just think it's so valiant, and I applaud anyone who is in this game. I think they're brilliant.
The quickest way to tell if someone has not been in sales is if they make a comment about how easy sales is, or salespeople are lazy. I'm like, no one says that about engineers or doctors. Why? Not that their jobs are easy either, but you know what I mean? It's like, come on, people, just because it's a communication skill, a role that's focused in communication, that people are like, oh, I talk to people, I write emails, I kind of present information time to time. It's not that hard, but that's a phenomenal example, and kind of got me fired up. I felt like a gladiator for a second as you were walking me through that example.
Well, Wendy, thanks again so much for joining us here on Reveal today. So excited to meet you.
Excited, yes. I'm going to get you over to Dublin, Sheena, and Devon now. So, and you can hear all of the accents. And trust me, there's many, many different Irish accents ahead of you. So yeah, I'm really just, again, delighted to be joining Gong. And I couldn't be more enthused about our future in EMEA. So exciting times ahead.